Think about it. Every single day, massive companies make decisions that impact all of our lives. But what's guiding them? What's their moral compass? Is it just the law? Is it all about profit for shareholders? Or is there, a higher ethical standard they should be following? Let's dive into that messy, fascinating world where profit, law, and ethics all collide.
I mean, just think about the corporate scandals that have absolutely rocked our trust. You know the names. Let's start with Enron back in 2001. This energy company looked like a titan, totally invincible, right before it completely imploded under the weight of some truly epic accounting fraud.
Or how about Volkswagen in 2015? They were caught red-handed deliberately programming their cars to cheat on emissions tests. So they're literally polluting our air while lying straight to the faces of regulators and their own customers. And of course, there's Theranos. This was the celebrated startup that was supposed to revolutionize medicine with its amazing blood testing tech, which, as we all found out, was basically smoke and mirrors. It never really worked.
And even more recently, we had the dramatic collapse of the crypto exchange FTX. It just goes to show you, it doesn't matter if we're talking about energy, cars, tech, or finance. The potential for these catastrophic ethical failures is always, always there.
So how do we even begin to make sense of all this? Well, here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we're going to walk through the corporate hall of shame. Then we'll try to untangle the tricky maze of what's legal versus what's ethical. We'll arm ourselves with an ethical toolkit, look at the global ripple effects of these big decisions, and then finally, we'll explore how to build a better business and what role you actually play in this whole system. All right, let's kick things off by looking at what happens when profit becomes the only thing that matters. The fallout from these things is just huge. We're not just talking about one company biting the dust. When a major corporation has an ethical meltdown, it sends shockwaves through the entire economy. Investor confidence gets shattered, public trust just evaporates, and sometimes entire industries have to completely rebuild their credibility from scratch. And of course, this often ends with executives facing prison time and governments scrambling to create a whole new set of rules. And the scale, the sheer amount of money involved, can be mind-boggling. Just look at Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme. We're talking about an estimated $65 billion. And look, that is not just some abstract number on a spreadsheet. That represents real people's life savings, their retirement funds, their families' futures, all just wiped out by one man's catastrophic ethical choices. I mean, $65 billion. It's just staggering. And it brings us right to the heart of this whole issue. A company can follow the law, check every single box, and still do something that feels deeply, fundamentally wrong. So let's try to untangle this maze. Just because something is legal, does that actually make it right? So let's break it down. Think of the law as the rule book for a game. It's formal, it's enforced by the government, and it tells you what you absolutely can and cannot do to stay in the game. But ethics, that's about how you play the game. It's so much broader. It's that internal compass, those moral principles that are motivated from within. The goal isn't just to not get kicked out, but to be a good player, to build character. The ancient philosopher Aristotle had a really powerful way of looking at this. He said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. And that's exactly it. Ethics isn't about one single decision. It's about the character you build through the choices you make over and over and over again. Okay, so if we're going to get a handle on this, we need the right tools in our belt. Let's build a little ethical toolkit using 3 different lenses we can use to look at any corporate decision. First up, we have deontology. Now, this one's all about the action itself, not the consequences. It asks, is this action inherently right or wrong? It follows a set of universal rules or duties, like don't lie or don't steal. For a deontologist, a lie is always wrong, period. It doesn't matter if it's a white lie that makes someone feel better. The act itself is what's judged. Okay, now let's flip that on its head with utilitarianism. This lens couldn't care less about the act itself. It's all about the outcome. The most ethical choice is simply the one that creates the greatest good for the greatest number of people. It's basically a moral calculator, weighing the good against the bad. The intention is less important than the final result. And finally, our third tool brings us right back to our friend Aristotle, virtue ethics. This one doesn't focus on the act or the outcome. Instead, it focuses on the character of the person or the company making the choice. The big question here isn't what should I do, but who should I be? It's all about cultivating virtues like honesty, courage, and integrity. So let's just put that all together real quick. Deontology asks, is this action right in and of itself? Utilitarianism asks, does this action lead to the best possible outcome? And virtue ethics asks, what choice reflects the kind of person or company I want to become? 3 very different questions leading to 3 very different answers. Okay, so we've got our toolkit. Let's put it to work in the real world, in our modern global economy, where a company's decisions can ripple across borders and affect people thousands of miles away. All right, let me throw a question at you. Imagine a huge multinational company. Their home country starts cracking down on pollution, bringing in tough new laws. Complying is going to be really expensive. So what do? Where do you think all that pollution ends up going? Well, it turns out there's a name for this. Researchers call it the push effect. Basically, when those environmental rules get tougher at home, it creates this powerful incentive, a push for companies to just pack up their most polluting operations and move them to countries with weaker, cheaper regulations. And when you look at the data, it is just wow. When a country gets tough on pollution, emissions at home go down by about 29%. Hey, that sounds great, right? A big win for the environment. But here's the catch. Those same companies then turn around and increase their emissions in other countries by a whopping 43%. So the pollution didn't vanish, it just got exported. Okay, so that's a pretty massive problem, right? But it also means we can start looking for solutions. If the old moral compass is clearly broken, how can companies start to forge a new one and build a genuinely better business? So a really common approach you hear about is corporate social responsibility, or CSR. The best versions of this follow a clear roadmap. First, you assess your impact. Then you strategize a plan to do better. Then you actually implement it. And here's the crucial 4th step. You have to constantly monitor and report on your progress. That last step, accountability, is the key. It's what separates real change from just, good PR. It has to be a never-ending cycle. But things are moving even beyond just CSR now. Ethicists are starting to talk about something called hypernorms. Think of these as the non-negotiables, the absolute moral minimums that should apply to every business on Earth, no matter what the local laws say. For example, a hypernorm would be, no company should ever use child labor. It's a baseline that just transcends borders. And that brings us full circle, right back to where we started. We've seen what's legal isn't always ethical, and what's most profitable is often not what's right. So when these things collide, who decides? Well, the tough truth is there is no single referee. It's a constant tension. So maybe the real question isn't just who decides, it's what role will you play? Because the choices we all make every single day, as employees, as customers, as citizens, that's what ultimately steers the corporate moral compass.